Okay, so it's now broadcasting and we're going to wait for people to come in. And then, of course, we'll give it a couple seconds. We had about 30 registered attendees, which is fabulous. I see someone coming in.
Great. Yeah.
Hello, Suzanne. And so we'll just give it a few minutes and then we'll get started. This is going to be great.
Hey, I'm excited.
Yay.
Just so you know, this is not red wine. Lest anybody worry, it's Diet Coke.
Yeah. This is Diet Coke. You would be forgiven for having red wine, though.
I love that you two are both Diet Coke drinkers. It's so great.
Oh my God. It's disgusting, but
I'm addicted to it.
So am I.
All right. What did everybody do today? Sort of everyone who's already in the chat or in the attendee thing sort of gets an inside look on everyone's day.
I did a little work on my next book.
Ooh.
Which I'm sure we'll discuss for a little bit anyway. And what else did I do? Oh, yes, I had, I don't know if you saw, but I had a wonderful conversation with Tony Shalhoub, the actor who plays Monk, and Abe Weisman on Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And so I posted some clips from that, chatted with Tony, walked my dog. That's
good stuff.
That's
very good stuff. You know, I actually never would have made the connection, and I love both Monk and Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I don't know why, but I would never have recognized that that's the same person.
He is a brilliant actor.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I knew him, you know, at drama school, and he's a great dramatic actor, and nobody even thinks of him as a dramatic actor. Everyone thinks of him as a comedian, but he's just incredibly talented.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One of the nicest people you would ever want to meet, ever.
Oh, I love hearing that about people. You know, you sort of get these expectations, and they don't necessarily, either people far exceed them and surprise you, or, you know, they fall flat of that. And it's always nice to hear when they exceed.
It's nice when they exceed. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're at about third of the way from attendees to registered. And since not everybody needs to hear me talk, since they'll see me at the end as well, I'll just start doing my intro. And hopefully by the time I'm done talking, we'll start to see sort of more people filter in. So, hello everyone. My name is Anastasia, and I am the events manager at Bank Square Books and Savoy Bookshop and Cafe. Thank you so much for joining our virtual event tonight. This is a author discussion with the fabulous Jan Eliasberg, who you see down at the bottom of your screen. And she is the author of the newly released novel Hannah's War, which is fabulous. If you haven't read it yet, I highly encourage you to order a copy from us. We have them on hand, which means that we will get it to you curbside pickup, local delivery. We'll send it out via media mail, and the fulfillment time is going to be very quick because I have all the books sitting right by my desk ready to go. And those books are going to come with a signed book plate, woohoo, it makes it all the more special. And let me tell you, it is a luxurious paperback. It is just so nice. It feels so good. It's just it's a beautiful book, and it's a great book too. Just a little bit of a breakdown about how the event is going to run. I promise I will stop talking soon. So Rick is going to introduce Jan, and then Jan will read a segment of the book, sort of to just set the context, and for those of you who haven't had a chance to read it yet, get you excited. And then Rick and Jan are going to be in conversation for a little while, and then we will open it up to audience questions. And I'm going to put a link to buy the book in the chat so you can click directly from there. Or if you have any questions, you can also email me directly at events@mysticbooksinc.com, and I will also put that in the chat. And I am going to let Rick take it away.
Thank you, Anastasia. My name is Rick Koster. I am a reporter at the Day newspaper. This is the latest in our read of the day book club that we have at the day in conjunction with Bank Square, and it's been a lot of fun. It is. We scrambled to get this together because this was supposed to be a live event at Bank Square, and Jan, it just happened when everything sort of shut down, and we've had to reschedule a few times. So you and I have sort of become pals because we've talked back and forth a lot, and it's a privilege. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, Jan is an award-winning writer and director of television and film who focuses on stories of exceptional women who have been denied, I might say, their rightful places in history. She's a graduate of Wesleyan, the Yale School of Drama. She directed the film Past Midnight with Rutger Hauer and Natasha Richardson. And she's had an amazing career across the broad quilt, if you will, of television. She directed dozens of episodes of such shows as Dawson's Creek, Miami Vice, Nashville, NCIS, Los Angeles, Bull, Supernatural. I could take up the other 40 minutes of this conversation just reading her credits, but we're here to talk about Hannah's War, and I would like to introduce that by saying what a remarkable accomplishment, Jan, particularly for a first novelist. It's an extraordinary read that I handled in two settings, only because I had to take our dog Virgil to the vet in between. So there was the pre-vet sitting, and then I finished it after that. Hannah Weiss is a Jewish physicist working in Berlin with an elite group of scientists on assignment to split the atom. This is about 1938. The Third Reich, though, is rising to power and beginning to militarize things like the science and the arts. So without giving too much away, Hannah leaves Germany. She ends up in New Mexico as part of the Manhattan Project, where we were building the atomic bomb. The story jumps back and forth between 1938 and 1945, and it addresses a number of irresistible questions. What happened to Hannah's family when she left? What happened to her secret lover? What is America's ultimate goal in the Manhattan Project? Who at Los Alamos has been leaking secrets overseas to Nazi Germany? And why is there an increasing attraction between Hannah at Los Alamos and Major Jack Delaney, who has been sent there specifically to find the spy and seems to be focusing on Hannah as the prime suspect? I think that's kind of sums it up, doesn't it, Jan?
That was very good, actually. You hit pretty much every beat.
Well, it is so good on so many levels that I think if I have done a good enough job, why don't we let you read the first chapter and then let's talk about this thing.
Okay, sounds good. So this is the opening chapter. I don't think it needs any setup, but it is in the voice of Dr. Hannah Weiss, first person. Chapter 1. They come for me at dawn, as I knew they would. I've slept in my clothes, and I ask if I may step into my shoes. They allow that, but nothing else. He tells me to go outside, and I do. Parked on the dirt road between my barracks and the laboratory is a vehicle the Americans quaintly call a paddy wagon, an absurdly chipper term for the dank iron trolley that will transport me from Los Alamos to the prison at Fort Leavenworth, where I will wait again, not for long, I fear, for my perfunctory trial and inevitable execution. The chain reaction leading to my death has been accelerated by my own divided heart. I see that now in a way I never could when all was theory. White chalk on blackboard, equations like pale bones scattered across scorched earth. The man I shouldn't have trusted, latches the manacle around my wrist and fixes it to a hasp welded hard to the bench. I'll protect you, he says, with such earnestness it makes me smile. You're lying again. He glances over his shoulder, sufficiently assured that no one can see us. He takes my face between his hands. I will protect you, Hannah, if I can. I think he might kiss me, but that would be a danger to both of us. He is a meticulous and cautious man by nature, skilled at the art of keeping secrets. Most lovers are. I have limited empirical evidence to support this hypothesis, having loved only 2 men, but both of them held truth at a safe distance, safe for them and not for me. His promise of protection, however well-intended, doesn't comfort me, so I comfort myself with equations. The distance from the laboratories in Los Alamos, New Mexico to the prison compound in Fort Leavenworth, Kansas is 874 miles. We left when dawn was still a wishful glow behind dark mountains. We are traveling, I estimate, at an average speed of 42 miles per hour, allowing for stops. Oh God, will they stop? Will they allow me that simple comfort? No, I won't think about that. The equations stay with them. I drum the fingers of my free hand, playing an invisible keyboard on the metal beside my legs. This is my habit when I run numbers, drumming my fingers on hard surfaces, desks, and tables. A distance of 874 miles at an average speed of 42 miles per hour creates a probability of 20.8095 hours of actual travel time, plus the approximately 27 minutes it would take for the MPs to force the paddy wagon to the side of the road, slide a bag over my head, and stay with the equations. I will protect you, Hannah, he said, if I can. A distance of 874 miles, leaving at dawn, allowing for the variable, if I can.
Fantastic. I already know what happens and I'm still messed up over that. So that's good. Jan, as you know from your career, and I know from my career, it's probably bad form for someone to say to a novelist, where do you get your ideas? Because that is just the most predictable. That should be a cure for insomnia, is to ask an author, where do you get it? Because I know where you got your idea, and here's what I find incredibly fascinating about Hannah's War. You happen to read one sentence in an old edition of the New York Times in a library, and if you had not seen that one sentence, there would be no Hannah's War. So tell us about that experience.
Okay. So I love libraries. I always have. I took a job once as a researcher just because I wanted to hang out in libraries and historical societies. And because I was interested, I was looking at the New York Times on the day they reported the bombing of Hiroshima. And, you know, the headline alone was enough to stop you in your tracks, you know, X number of hundreds of thousands dead, Truman vows reign of ruin, and then this wonderful historical article that the New York Times did, because the Manhattan Project and all the elements of developing the bomb had taken place in secret, complete secret. No one, even people working at Los Alamos, didn't necessarily know what they were working on. That's how secret it was. And so the New York Times had to fill in the world about how this bomb had come to be. And below the fold, in a simple paragraph, there was this sentence: the key component that allowed the Allies to develop the bomb was brought to us by a female non-Aryan physicist. And that was it. Instantly, who is this woman? Why have I never heard of her? This is the biggest discovery of the 20th century. How is it possible that her face isn't staring out of every science textbook? What a story she must have, being Jewish, living in Berlin, being non-Aryan. I know what that means. And I'm going to find her and I'm going to tell her story. It was really that lightning bolt moment. I had no idea when I saw that what that was going to mean in my life, that it would mean 10 years of research, 40 drafts of an outline, wondering if I was going to write it as a screenplay, finally deciding I wanted to write it as a novel. It was a very long journey, but a wonderful journey, really every step of the way. Sometimes frustrating, but the end result right now, absolutely worth it.
So the physicist you're referring to, Lisa Meitner, was her name. And yeah, there was just an element that she plugged in that literally made it possible for nuclear fission to happen. That was the missing piece, so to speak. Now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, one of the things that's really interesting is the term nuclear fission was coined by Lisa Meitner.
Okay.
So, that's what we think of as splitting the atom, but no one really called it that until Lisa Meitner sort of said, this is what we have done.
Yeah. So, as an aside, somebody won a Nobel Prize essentially for stuff like this, and it wasn't Lisa Meitner, but we'll go into that later. Now, given your connections, your vast experience in television and film, the most obvious thing to me was, boy, this screams for a movie. And yet you said, this is when I will write my first novel. What was that process like that led you to that revelation?
Well, that was a fairly long process because I went back and forth quite a bit. I had it, as indeed I have all my life. I grew up in New York and I always wanted to write not the great American novel, but a great American novel. And yet I was drawn to Hollywood and, seemed to have a gift for directing. And so, there was like the angel and the devil on my shoulder, right? The angel was saying, oh, write a wonderful novel. And the devil was saying, oh, they're offering you how much money to do this, episode of X. But, what I was trying to do, the money was great, but what I was trying to do all of that time I was directing was to tell stories. And so I didn't see writing a novel or writing a screenplay and directing it as different in substance, just different in form. The problem is that you may have noticed that Hollywood has not been exactly kind to women, at least not since the great films of the 30s and early 40s. You don't see a lot of complex women lead characters. You don't see a lot of women directing films. You see some women writing films, but it says something when the director who could write her own ticket because she was nominated for Lady Bird, right? Nominated for an Academy Award, does yet another interpretation of Little Women, as if there are no other stories. Nothing against Little Women, but there are other stories with women at the center of them that can and should be told. So ultimately, what kind of pushed me toward the novel, in addition to my real desire to actually write fiction, and kind of feeling that there was a depth and complexity to this story that might work better in fiction than in film, where you're limited to the images that you see and how good the performances are. You know, that first chapter I read, you know, I guess in film it could be voiceover, but everybody would be asleep 2 minutes in. So, but the real thing that pushed me over the edge was that I was asked to write the story of the women air service pilots in World War II, which is a great story of heroism and camaraderie. And Cameron Diaz was attached to produce and star, and Nicole Kidman was attached to star. And I thought, well, this is the ticket, you know, what a great story, what a great cast. And I wrote a great script and nobody would make it. And I just thought, I cannot doom this wonderful Hannah, you know, to an unfulfilled life. You know, I would like to at least have a chance to get the story I want to tell down and be able to have somebody read it, and not to be then going and trying to fundraise to get the money to make the movie. And so that was ultimately the decision. And once I made the decision, I actually had been researching a lot and outlining a lot. And so the writing actually happened very quickly once I really committed to doing it.
One thing I found interesting when I read it is, you know, typically if you're a first-time novelist, now acknowledging that you have a very fine reputation in Hollywood and in the entertainment business, but typically the first-time novelist that submits something to an agent, they want it immediately to plug it in to a genre or something that's immediately sellable. And when I read Hannah's War, there were elements to it that I wasn't expecting. There was the romance. It's a war story. It's an account of a genius, a scientific genius, a female denied her place in history, and then that we're talking about women that can't get a fair shake. Leave it to me, the man, to go. And there was an element to a crime novel. It's like a spy thriller, which, let's admit it, is kind of a male demographic, maybe, you know. So, but that's in there too. And so it has something for everything, for everyone. Did you run into any hesitation from agents or editors or wherever? It was like, well, this is just too many different things.
No, fortunately. Because I wrote the novel, as they say in Hollywood, on spec, meaning nobody was paying me. So I really just wrote what I wanted to write. And then it was a question of finding if anybody wanted to take that and publish it. And I was lucky. There was a small bidding war, and wonderful editor Judy Klain at Little Brown was one of the really passionate and vocal people who really wanted to publish the book. And when I talked to her, I felt like she really saw the same book that I did. In a way, I would say maybe now, because once a book is out, it gets marketed, you know, and maybe it's being marketed. You know, there is definitely a sense that women's historical fiction is a particular thing. It's, you know, and even written in World War II, you know, there is a long list of books with female protagonists in World War II. And to some extent, I think that, you know, people may not know that it's an espionage spy thriller. That's not the way it's been marketed. I love that aspect of the book. I think that's part of the engine that makes it really work. But I think that, guys should go buy the book and let me know, because, I'd like to think I've got a lot of twists and turns in there.
You do, and as someone that reads a lot of crime and thriller fiction, plus you just have this great Jack Delaney is a real. He's a Raymond Chandler, Graham Greene kind of guy. So guys, if you're being forced to watch this, I hope not, but there is that element. But it's a great story across the board, and this is something that you and I have spoken about off air, so to speak, Jen. But as a guy who was told by teachers as early as the third grade that don't try to do anything with mathematics or science because that ain't going to work. This deals with incredibly complex physics and science, and you did an incredible job of making it palatable and digestible for the layperson and the guy who can't balance his own checkbook. So was that a problem for you? Did you have to sit down and go, I have to master one of the most arcane aspects of physics in history?
Yes, I did. And I will have a face-off with you about who is worse at balancing the checkbook, because I can do it if pressed, but my father was a mathematician, and he used to sit down to quote unquote help me with my homework. And it always ended up as, I don't understand how you can't get it. Like, why don't you get it? And I just because I don't get it. And Dad yelling at me is not going to help. But
Do we have the same father?
Maybe we did. But I was always much better in theater and English, but it's interesting when I think it's very good that I came upon this subject through this actual woman, Lisa Meitner, because she talks about mathematicians and scientists as being almost true artists. There are beautiful quotes where she says, science offers a sense of awe and wonder about the natural order of things. And so when I hear something like that, I think, oh my God, that sounds like what happens to me when I'm writing or directing, and I'm in the flow, and I just feel like I know how things are going to work. And if science is that, I understand that. And I think it was a challenge too, that I love movies, for example, like maybe A Beautiful Mind would be one example, or movies, or there was that wonderful movie about the crash, the housing crash with Steve Carell, The Big Short, with Steve Carell. And I love movies that explain things that are difficult and thorny and impossible to really understand. But then, in a movie, you'll see a scene that illustrates something, and you'll go, oh my God, I understand game theory. Or, oh, now I know about the housing crash. Now I know why that all happened. And so the challenge of really showing people the not all of the engineering and the equations, but the sort of art of how you get from splitting the atom to a bomb. I thought it was a great story. And I really enjoyed doing the work I had to do to figure out how to tell it so that people would understand it and would go, oh, I get it. I get it.
I think one of the things that fascinates me is you were clever enough to use one of the main characters, Jack, the guy investigating to find out the spy. He sort of became your entryway through his questions by which we could understand, because she would have to explain to him the physics. And I thought that was just a tremendous device you came up with.
It was also, I think it's the only way I could have told the story, because the truth is that Los Alamos in 1945 was such a bizarre, it was a collection of these mad geniuses, and they all were, but they were acting like 12-year-old boys. They were up in this mountain mesa where nobody knew where they were, and they had kind of everything they needed at their disposal, which almost no scientists ever get. And they were having these raucous parties where the punch was spiked with lab alcohol, which was 200 proof. And Oppenheimer was known for, they said he existed on caffeine, cigarettes, and martinis. And, and this is one of the geniuses of the time. And this kind of, this amazing moment in time where you have these geniuses with a huge mission, and then you have the military trying to sort of pen them in and keep them working, but also they're being spied on because half of them are communists. And, they have all of these sort of amazing, like they're being tailed every time they leave the base. Their phones are being tapped. I mean, just to describe that, you have to see it from the point of view of somebody arriving there for the first time and going, what the hell is this? It's this like
Right.
summer camp in the desert where they're building a weapon of mass destruction. But they're also like scrawling equations into the wooden bathroom stalls because they're just, excited 12-year-olds with a discovery, with Legos, wanting to see if it's going to work. And then, of course, there are all the overriding questions about the morality of it and what was going to happen with that bomb when it was built, and what the military wanted to do and what the scientists wanted to do. I mean, the ethical questions are enormous, and I think they're with us to this day.
I want to follow up. But actually, let me backtrack for a minute, because you've just described this like a frat house of geniuses on the biggest project with unbelievable implications. And we have Hannah in the middle of this. A, she's being investigated. B, she fled Germany, left everyone she loved, and doesn't know what's happened to them. This adds incredible tension, what's going on around her. Now, you based this obviously on Lisa Meitner, but there's also, it's fiction. Did you know where her story was going to end with all the tangents of family and romance, so to speak, as well, while you were writing?
I generally do very specific outlines. So in this case, I did know more about the story in Germany than I did Los Alamos at first, because that was the spark for the story. And Lisa Meitner's life actually was quite fascinating up to a point. she and her partner were on the verge of this discovery, and she was Jewish in Berlin in 1938. And, that was a difficult position to be in. And one of the reasons she stayed is because she kept being told that she would be protected by all of her colleagues, and that, she was working at this great institute, couldn't be touched. And then when Austria was annexed and she was Austrian, she suddenly became a German Jew, and there were no protections at all. And she had to leave within 6 hours. And in fact, one of the scientists at the institute called the Gestapo and told them where she was and how to find her. So that story in Germany, up to that point was extremely compelling. But I knew that I wasn't going to do a biopic of Lisa Meitner. Biopic, or, that's the Hollywood in me. I wasn't going to do a biography of Lisa Meitner because there have been very good ones. And also because in doing all that research, I got very, very, very interested in the second half of the story, which is what happens then when you have the information and the bomb is possible, and you have a race now between Germany and Hitler, who wants the bomb desperately to, blow up London, for starters. But then in America, you have this collection of mostly Jews or Eastern European scientists in the same situation as Hannah, with family, with friends. They don't know where they are. They may be in camps. They may be dead. And they're sort of working on the bomb because they feel like if they don't get it, it will go to Hitler. And they know what that means too. So here are these two sides of this race. And the thing about Hannah is that she has seen in Germany what happens when pure science becomes militarized. She's seen the Nazis come into the institute and say, this is no longer a research institute, it's a military installation now, and everything you're doing is now for weapons only. So if you have her at Los Alamos, she has a different view of it than people who were not in that situation, because she sees what the military is up to in Los Alamos. It's not as bald, as obvious as Nazis sort of goose-stepping into an institute with their banners and taking over. But the military had some goals that they didn't share with the scientists. And the scientists had some compunctions about what they were doing, and they were meeting, they were, sending petitions around, lobbying to demonstrate the bomb and not to drop it on innocent people. So it was that tension and conflict that really intrigued me. So that's, I guess, part of where it deviated from the real story of Lisa Meitner.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun as a reader with, I think, a reasonable knowledge and context of what happened in World War II. You would lead me into places where I was like, well, I'm not sure whether that's real or whether Jan is making it up for the story, which is always a cool place to be in as a reader. But no pun intended, you dropped a major bomb on me as a reader. And it was something, I mean, we all know history. The bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I thought I knew why that happened. In the book, it's not like that. And it turns out So do you want to spoil that now that I brought it up? Because it's kind of irresistible.
Oh God, I don't. Well, let me say this because I think this is important. The 75th anniversary of the Trinity test, which was the test of the first bomb, is coming up July 16th. So I think that these conversations are going to be in the air. I'm actually writing a couple of op-eds about some of this because I think it is important to talk about. We have definitely in America been spoon-fed a very traditional and pro-American, rah-rah, patriotic story about the bomb, which is that it was dropped because hundreds of thousands of American young men were fighting in Japan, and the only way to get Japan to surrender was to make this, enormous, devastating weapon. And not to demonstrate it, but to actually drop it. There are things that have come out that contradict that story, or that at least show that it wasn't as simple as that. And I'll just say that a couple of them I did use in the book because the sources are very good. And one of them is that that Japan was on its knees. I mean, everyone's like, well, Japan, they will never submit. They'll commit suicide. They'll fight to the end. But in fact, there had been diplomatic conversations going on through back channels, and it was pretty clear that Japan was ready to give up, and that Russia was about to come into the war, and that would have been the last Japan totally would have given up. Also, there is a very interesting telegram, and I know this is what you're talking about. It was from Curtis LeMay, who was in charge of all the bombing of Japan with regular fire bombs. And basically the telegram, it's written to General Groves, who was the military head of Los Alamos. And LeMay says, we have firebombed so much of Japan that we're worried there isn't going to be anything left. So hurry up with your bomb. We're trying to leave these two cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, untouched. So you can show the devastation this weapon is capable of. And you can show not only the Japanese who are on their knees already, but the Russians who are the next enemy.
Unbelievable.
And
just to make a demonstration. Wow.
Just to show, because a demonstration, would have certainly shown the magnitude of the weapon, right? But it wouldn't have shown the ruthlessness of being willing to use it. Yeah. And this caused the scientists an enormous amount of regret. And, I think really with Oppenheimer probably caused him an early death because he was just so pained by what he had done.
Yeah.
So I get into, sorry.
Let me shift gears a little bit.
Okay.
Everybody is, now I already said earlier that it's not good form to ask where someone gets their ideas from, and I sort of cheated and skirted around that, but I think people are fascinated by what a writer's day is like. And we all know it's an isolated job. You're in solitude a lot. You have to do that. But I want to make a little twist on that by asking. I've been, as I interviewed you before the book came out, when we thought you were going to be appearing in March, I talked to a lot of folks like yourself. That's part of my job. And since we have all been in lockdown with the pandemic, I have talked to some writers who have said that all of a sudden the isolation, which has never bothered them before because it's part of the process, what's going on in the world now has changed a little bit. It's not always the same with all of them, but it's hard to separate them from writing with not being hyper aware of what's happening. And to one degree or another, it's affected this solitude that they're used to working under. Does that make any sense? And does that resonate with you as a writer?
It makes complete sense. And I went through several phases of this. In the very beginning, in the very, very beginning, I was just waking up in tears and rage because my book tour had been canceled, and I was trying to figure out how to sell my book and get the word out, And I was so looking forward to the book tour because I really wanted to have these kinds of conversations about, what people had gotten from the book and what intrigued them, and, maybe even what they felt I hadn't accomplished at all, because I'm interested in all of that. But so that was phase one, was just like rage and tears. And then phase two was, well, this isn't that bad, because really this is kind of like my everyday when I'm writing. And I love solitude, and I love it so much that my friends sometimes give up on me because I don't answer the phone because I'm on a roll, with some writing. Or I'll make a date thinking, I'm going to have a great day and I'm going to want to meet someone to go to the movies. And then at 6 o'clock, I realize, oh, I've just gotten started and I don't want to go to the movies. I want to keep writing because now I'm in a role. So, it's like that. Okay, so that's pretty typical, and I'm not concerned. And then as things just continued on, first of all, I have been working on my next book, but my concentration has been terrible. I mean, the amount of worry. I try not to listen to the news on television. I read things, and I'll listen to Cuomo, our tough love gov, and but it's the period of when you're writing a book, that you're going to finish a draft at some point, right? You get a certain amount done every day. Waking up with this situation, the hardest thing is just not knowing when it's ever going to end, and worrying about people I know, worrying about friends who are sick. I've been very fortunate. One actor that I worked with did actually die, but no one else that I've been really close to. But, it's very unsettling. And it's also, I have to say, when you think about the Pandora's box that was opened by dropping the bomb, and by Truman actually refusing to listen to the scientists once he dropped it, just sort of saying, hey, this is my decision, get these whiny Oppenheimer with his ethical concerns, get him away from me, I don't want to hear it. There's a parallel, because is Anthony Fauci going to be at the press conference, or is he going to be muzzled because nobody wants to hear what he has to say? These issues are very much of our time. right
Yeah.
now.
It is. Jan, we could talk about this for a long time. And we thank everybody for joining us at the Read of the Day, our book club that we have, the day has in conjunction with Bank Square Books. And of course, thanks to Anastasia and Annie Philbrook for making this possible. We do have enough time, I think, to remind everybody to order the book, order the damn thing from Bank Square, get 2 or 3 of them. I think we can get, I think you can get signed copies somehow, right? But Anastasia, do
Yes.
we have anybody that's that might want to chime in with questions or anything? Or
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So we have 2 questions, and they're both really good. So, Jan, we'll start with Lori's question, and that is, it reads, "Hi, Jan. Let me first start by saying how annoyed I get by artists who are talented in more than one art form. Having said that," I think she meant that as a joke. Had she said that, I'm very eager to read the book. I hold a private pilot's license, so I'm intrigued by your WASP script, and I'm wondering if the research you did on that project helped inform the time period you chose to write your first novel in.
That's a great question. I actually was working on, so the research for Hannah's War took, as I said, quite a long time, like 10 years. And I actually wrote the WASP script within that 10-year period. So it was actually more the other way around. But I did find that even though they're both World War II stories, they're really different, because when I was writing about the WASP, you know, these women, scientists are kind of odd ducks, and they're a little bit, you know, they can be a little weird, you know, but these women who flew these planes were just great, big, fabulous characters who, you know, who would speak to me. I mean, they were not holding any secrets back. They were in a war movie, you know? And so even though it was the same time period, the feeling was very different. And of course there were deaths. 36 WASPs, I believe, or 38 died in the line of duty. And there was discrimination because they were trained in the military, but they were not given military benefits or death benefits for their families. So they were also fighting on 2 fronts, you know, the proving they could do it, and then also the sexism of people saying that they couldn't and wouldn't be paid properly and all of that. So there's some themes that are similar, but, you know, the WASP, they were in Sweetwater, Texas. You know, they were like down in oil country, grabbing planes off farmers' fields and going joyriding just because that was their idea of a great Sunday, you know, doing aerobatics. And that's different from these people up in, you know, Los Alamos, New Mexico, that were being followed and that were using their heads. And so they're very, very different stories. And I love them. I love them both. I really do. I hope WASP gets made. It would be a great, fun movie. Yeah, and so, yes, certainly there are those basic historical facts that you just have to know when you're writing in a time period. And that did help because I didn't have to do all of that from scratch for both stories.
Thank you so much.
Does that answer the question?
And Lori did. I'll let Lori chat back in if she wants to, but she did say she was joking around with her opening statement, and she's so impressed that you're so good at writing, directing, worked in theater, TV, film, and now fiction. And then we have another comment, and that is for you, Jan, and for all of us at Bank Square Books in the Day. pijrm@aol.com says, thank you for a wonderful discussion. And they are so happy that we could do this in spite of social isolation. So you are welcome. Thank you for attending the event. And then I have a question here from David. And David says, do you write in like a linear manner, or do you skip around to different ideas for the characters and the plots sort of as they come to you?
Okay, great. I mean, that's a question that most people want to know. It's about process. And I really have learned that writers have different processes. There is no right way to do it. You just do it the way it works for you. So for me, I do, as I said, these very, very, very involved outlines. And this is something that I learned from film. When you sit down to write a story for a screenplay, you have these index cards. I have some, like right here. And it starts very simple. You write, opening scene, or then you'll write, third act low, which is, the all is lost moment. And you go and you start figuring these things out structurally so that you're not really writing yet at all. You're just thinking about the beats of the story. And the better your structure is, the easier it's going to be to write, because if the structure works, you're 3/4 of the way home. Really, I've seen books that are structured well, where the writer can barely spell and they still work because the structure carries that story. But then I'll have that, and I won't necessarily have it all filled out. I'll just have a good sort of idea. And then I'll add like the research. So if I'm researching something and I go, oh, this is a great event to put in that all is lost scene, then I'll just write something on a Post-it and I'll stick it on the all is lost card. And, my handwriting is terrible. I have little scrawls and scratches, and then there's a second card. And so I'm adding research, and then I'm adding like an idea about dialogue, whatever that sort of, whatever comes to my imagination. And then I sort of put that aside and I do what I call free writing, which is I just write in the character's voice. And I don't write about anything that's on these cards. It's about some tiny little moment, or, a relationship with her mother, or, a moment when a character felt like completely authentic and free. So it will be some little teeny moment that I just am writing kind of fast and not really thinking and just seeing what comes out. And that's the moment the characters do kind of speak to me sometimes, which is really, really great. So then I have all this kind of, backstory or material that may not make it into the book, may not even be intended for the book, but something might, right? So if I have a scene where I say, they start to fall in love, I know usually people fall in love when they've revealed some very vulnerable part of themselves. And maybe something I wrote in the free write is that vulnerable moment. So maybe I do take a little bit of that and put it into the outline. So between those two things, then I sit down, I pull it all together, I write out the outline, and it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And usually it is like 30 pages. And then I'm ready to actually sit down and write the book. But there's so much already done. It's not that the book is easy, it's just that there are a lot of kind of signposts in place already, so it doesn't sit it doesn't feel like I'm sitting down to the blank page with nothing to guide me. So that's my process.
Perfect. Perfect.
That was an incredible insight into sort of the writing process. And I think it made me feel inspired for sure. So it looks like we are out of questions. And I think you covered so much, from history to the writing process to current events. My goodness, what a enlightening hour we've had together here. I just want to make a note. Jan and I spoke a little bit. Oh, it looks like maybe one more question. We'll throw this one last question in the ring, and then I will make my appeal to encourage everyone to buy the book one more time. Lori asked, putting on another hat, if you had an offer, how quickly do you think you could write the screenplay and cast Hannah's War? And I'm going to tack on my own addition here. Who would you cast as Hannah?
Oh, well, I happen to have thought about that. First of all, I'm not sure that Hannah's War should be a movie. I think maybe it should be a limited series, like Big Little Lies was on Netflix, because there's an awful lot of story there for one movie. However, it could go either way. And I do have, Jack is the hardest one for me to cast. So I'm still open to people's ideas about Jack, but I have two ideas for Hannah. One is younger, because in World War II, people got to these very important positions when they were very, very young. And I don't think people realize that when we're looking at pictures of, generals and stuff. They're usually like in their 30s. And as a scientist, you do your best work before you're 30 or you're not a genius. So my young version of Hannah is Saoirse Ronan, who knows from Lady Bird, from playing Jo March, but the reason I want to cast her is because of what she did in Mary Queen of Scots, where she was the most, she can do anything with perfect stillness, and the ferocity and the intelligence is just right there in her eyes. And if I went for a slightly older Hannah, it would probably be Natalie Portman. Stefan, who we haven't hardly talked about, but Stefan is Hannah's collaborator in Germany. There's a great German actor who is so, this has never happened to me, but I literally saw this guy in a movie and it was like, I didn't think you existed. Like, this is the guy. This is Stefan. His name is Alexander Frayling, Frehling. He had a part in Homeland. He played one of Claire Danes' doomed lovers, because any man Claire Danes got involved with was bound to die at some point. So, and then Jack is a difficult one. I feel like what I'm looking for is Humphrey Bogart, and I don't know who our current Humphrey Bogart is. But
yeah, that's tough.
Email me if you have ideas. I'm very open to hearing. And guess what? I've already written the screenplay. So.
Oh, cool.
There you go.
There you go.
So now we just have to cross our fingers and hope it gets picked up. I think a limited series would be so cool. I know I would watch. And I also just Googled Andrew Frayling and I totally see it.
You see it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the guy is just, he's as Aryan as they come, but there's a warmth there, that some of these Aryan guys are just so cold and you're like, oh my God, you're a total Nazi. But he has this, he's so charming. But he could be a manipulator too. So anyway, So was there anything else in that question that I didn't answer? I think
you covered it.
Yeah, I could do it really quickly because it's already done.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you both so much. Jan did tell me that she is available for book club discussions, so more of this sort of question repartee, and you can email her publicist.
Only if Rick can come too, because I really like his questions.
I'm honored. I would be honored.
And so I am putting Jan's publicist email in the chat right now. You can also email me, again, events@Mystic Books Inc., and I can share it with you that way, but she'd be happy to schedule time to come Zoom with your book club after you've all read the book, which would just be so fun. And I just want to say thank you again for everyone for attending and chatting us some questions. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening. Be safe, be healthy. And we can't wait to see you again back in the store. And Jan, hopefully when your new book comes out, we'll be able to host you in person.
I will be there. I will be there.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much. This was really, really fun.
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you everyone so much.
Have a good night.
Rick. See you soon.
See you soon. Have a great night, everyone. Bye.
Bye.